Welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Keep It Fictional with the Port Moody Public Library. It's the summer and it's vacation time, so it seems like there's a lot of episodes where they're just two people instead of the whole team. But today I've got Emma with me. It's the Emma and Virginia show. So welcome, Emma. How are you today?
Tired, but I'm here. I've
But
got my
you're here.
coffee. I've got my coffee, and we've got a super exciting topic today. So, I'm tired, but I'm hyped about recording this episode.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we thought we'll take this golden opportunity to talk about a topic that we are both very passionate about that the others may not care as much or at all. But I want to assure everybody that, as Emma we were talking about it earlier, this is a little bit of a very niche kind of topic. It sounds very narrow, but do stay tuned. If you hear the topic, you're like, I have no idea what that is, because we're using it really as a jumping point to talk about books, to talk about literature, and to recommend different kinds of books, including some poetry, some short stories, and we would love to use this topic to introduce you to possibly some new authors through this new topic. So, as we have alluded to, I think I don't know how many times we mentioned it on the podcast before, but
Definitely multiple.
multiple times, yes. We keep saying we should do this. Well, we're making our dreams come true today. Today's episode is our chance to profess our love for the series Bungo Stray Dogs. So again, for those who are unfamiliar with the series, just a very, very short intro. I'm just going to only touch on the premise because, like many series, when the series develops, the story develops, it really goes into many different like arcs and story arcs and many different. So we're just going to do like the sort of premise in the very beginning, and I also, of course, hope that you will be inspired to pick it up and experience that yourself. So this is a Bungo Stray Dog is a manga series that has also been adapted into an anime TV series. And Emma, did you watch the series first, or did you read the manga first?
I watched it first.
Same here.
That's typically how it
Oh,
goes
okay.
for me. I usually learn about series because they become anime, and often what happens is I watch the series up until because the manga is usually longer than an anime series. So I watch the series all the way through the end, and then I pick up the manga where the anime series leaves off, and then I continue reading on in the story. So I'll get into how I discovered Bungo Stray Dogs, but that was kind of my watch order. But I've only read a couple volumes of the manga, so I'm not as far into the series as you probably are, Virginia, but I have seen, I think, seasons 1 through 3 of the anime.
Interesting. Because you don't go back like to watch, like to read whatever all the kind of the storylines that has already been covered in the
I
anime.
I have before, but I don't think I did with Bungo Stray Dogs. But I have with other series, like I have with Hunter x Hunter, I have with Haikyuu, but not every series.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. Yeah. So again, for those who are familiar, this is a manga series, a TV series, and it is created by Kafka Asagiri and illustrated by Sengo Harukawa. And there's a lot. There's the main manga, which I have here, but there's also a lot of side sort of stories and a lot of light novels, including like Bungo Stray Dog One, which is like the cute version of the characters in school. Super super cute. Um, Yeah, so the story sort of takes place in Yokohama, Japan. And in very, very super oversimplified terms, it is kind of like a good guys versus a bad guys kind of story. We got our armed detective agency, they're the so-called good guys, and they are here to protect Yokohama from all the threats to the city that are a little too big for the local police to handle. And one of the main threats to the city is the Port Mafia, who is a criminal organization that is trying to take over the city. And our story begins with one of our main characters. I would say probably the main character, maybe, yeah, Atsushi Nakajima, who has just arrived to the city and he's been kicked out of the orphanage that he's lived in all his life. He's never been treated well there. He gets constantly berated by the people that run the orphanage. He has a very traumatic experience with them, but it is his home. But now they no longer want him to be there. They no longer welcome him. So he has to leave. And so he's just arrived in Yokohama. And the city is all like, talking about this tiger. Apparently, there's this tiger that has been roaming around in the city. And of course, it is poses a threat to public. And so, like they're kind of all everybody looking for this white tiger. And what, of course, unbeknownst to unbeknownst to Atsushi himself, is that he is actually the white tiger. He turns into the white tiger at night and he doesn't know it. He has no memory that this is his ability, that there's something that he can do. So whatever he does while he's in tiger form, he has absolutely no memory of it until the armed detective agency figured that out, because there's like, of course, they want to protect the city. So they're looking for this tiger, but the Port Mafia is also looking for this tiger for a different reason that you will discover later. And so everybody's looking for him, and he didn't know that. He didn't know he's a tiger. But once they've discovered that, after Atsushi passed some test, they decided to recruit him to join the armed detective agency so that they can sort of show him how to control his magical power. And that's what the series is based on. A lot of the characters who have this special ability, so this magic that they could do. And that's why, like, when you have magic users to go up against magic users, like the local police just can't deal with a lot of this. So they need the armed detective agency to do that. But not only that, I think the reason why, as I pointed out earlier, why we're doing an entire episode on Bungo Stray Dog, not just because we love it, but also because all the characters are actually based on real authors. They are all kind of created by real authors. They're mostly, many of them are, many of the main characters are Japanese authors. They're classic, like, household names, but there are also some North American and European authors that is going to show up, later in the series. That would be like people like, Mark Twain, H.P. Lovecraft, Herman Melville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and a lot of other kind of characters. Dostoevsky shows up later on as a pretty big character in here. So it's really, really interesting because, like, it is one of those series that I think, definitely for me, it did that, but it brought, a lot of people to, like, kind of like, I wonder, maybe I should go read. It definitely inspired me to read some of these authors that I had never read before, especially some of the classic authors, because I was more kind of into the contemporary Japanese authors. And so I've never gone back to read. So this series definitely kind of inspired me to do that. And the word bungo in Japanese basically means literary. So it's like very, 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 very related to books and literature and, of course, our podcasts. So Emma, how did you get started on this show? Why did you start watching? And what do you love about this?
So my origins to watching Bungo Stray Dogs are a little bit embarrassing. For those who remember or who have listened to our book talk episode where we talked about books that are popular on TikTok. I mentioned that I was only on TikTok very, very briefly. Within a couple months I learned that it just wasn't for me. It wasn't something I wanted to keep around. But while I was on TikTok, I think it took the TikTok algorithm maybe 2 hours of use to figure out that I was queer and that I loved anime. So pretty much all of the content that I was getting on my TikTok feed was queer anime content, which was really helpful for discovering new shows. So like I started watching Tokyo Revengers because I saw it on TikTok. I started watching Skate the Infinity because I saw it on TikTok, and I started watching Bungo Stray Dogs because I saw it on TikTok. I had no idea initially that it was literary related, just like I was seeing these kind of like compilation videos of the characters, and I was like, oh, I love like a typical shonen or seinen series, which for those that don't know are anime and manga that are geared towards shonen is for like younger boys, so like teenage boys, and seinen is for young adult men. So a lot of these types of series typically have a lot of like action, maybe some violence, some magic going on. And those are the kinds of series that I typically really enjoy. And I love series that have really complex power and magic systems to them. Like things like Avatar: The Last Airbender has like a very in-depth, it's not an anime, but it has a very in-depth magic system with like specific rules that it follows. Same with series like Full Metal Alchemist, or series like Hunter x Hunter, where the magic is like something that's special to certain individuals, but it's not widely known in society. So magic users in Hunter x Hunter, it's called Nen. Nen users are kind of like a secret society. And I've always been really interested in series like that. And Bungo Stray Dogs follows pretty much that exact same formula. So when I discovered it, I was like, oh, this is totally going to be an Emma show. I'm going to get into it. Um, but what really made me like fall in love with it was the literary references. I actually did not initially realize that the characters were literary figures. I think what happened was I was curious about like the character Osamu Dazai. So I Googled Osamu Dazai expecting to get results about a Bungo Stray Dogs character. And I was like, this man is an author? I had never heard of No Longer Human. I'd never heard of him before. So I was shocked. And then I was like, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, Atsushi Nakajima, like Googling all of these people. And like, this is how I discovered that all the characters were named after literary figures. Um, so and like being a literature nut, being a librarian, being a big reader, I was like, well, it feels like the show was made for me. It's got like silly, like there's like silly comedy to it. It's got this really, really fascinating complex magic system. I don't know if you mentioned in your intro, Virginia, but all of the powers, like not everyone in this society has powers. It's a secret society. Only specific people have special abilities, but their abilities are named after stories or pieces of writing that those authors have written. It's usually the most popular piece of writing. Um, but yeah, so all like there's literary themes and there's like the characters are kind of based off of these real authors, but then parts of their personality and parts of their magic abilities are like directly connected to themes in their literature and themes in their books. Like No Longer Human is the name of Dazai's power in the show and in the manga. So I thought that was super fascinating. Like it was like doing like literary analysis, like learning about these characters, analyzing their special abilities, and that's something that I get a lot of joy out of. So obviously, I fell in love with Bungo Stray Dogs. And for me personally, the kinds of anime that I really like are the ones that have, and you can disagree with me if you want, Virginia, but I think there's a lot of homoerotic tension between a lot of these male characters in Bungo Stray Dogs. I see it in Haikyuu too. I see it in pretty much every anime that I watch. And that's something that brings me a lot of joy. So, like Dazai and my favorite character, Chuya Nakahara, have a lot of tension going on. Akutagawa and the main character, Atsushi, have a lot of tension going on. Akutagawa has this obsession with Dazai that like can't be anything but gay. So that's something that I personally really, really enjoy about this show. So that's my Bungo Stray Dogs backstory. Virginia, I want to know how you got into it.
Oh, well, as usual, I'm very late to the party. I think I started watching the anime only last year. And I also same thing, I started watching it before I read the manga, but I tend to will go back all the way to the beginning to read the manga because I always find I really do enjoy the art. Especially for a series that I love the art. I wanted to see it on paper, like sometimes it's a different experience. So but yeah, like I started it and I feel like it's always like it's been on my radar. Like it's like I kind of heard the name, but I never really went and looked at it because there's so many manga out there, so many anime out there, right? So I think it was just like something that I'm like, oh, one day I'm just see what it is. And the same thing, I have no idea that it's based on literary like actual authors. I was just kind of like look, and it was an interesting story, like to start right from the start. And so I'm like, okay, like let's see what this is. So yeah, and then so I I think for me mostly I definitely the literary thing is what like makes it like extra special, I think, to all of us for all the reasons that you mentioned earlier. But I also love like I love a show that has a really good because I'm definitely more of a shonen manga person. So I love sort of that balance between the very tense kind of action sequences, like, but also with a lot of like kind of like existential almost like struggles that all these characters go through because it's not yeah, they're not just like, good or bad, but there's like a lot more to them, and which I really, really love, like the way they create these characters. And because all of them, they are called stray dogs after all, like all of them are looking for a place that they can belong. They're finding their place in the world, and trying to do what they believe is like the most important thing to them for all of them. So I love that kind of balance, but I also love the goofiness and the of them all. Like they're so silly sometimes, and I think once you fall in love with like a cast, an ensemble cast especially, once you fall in love with them, like you just want to spend all your time with them, like seeing them go through whatever adventures they're going to be. And it's just like so cute. Like, I love their interaction so much, like so that's one of the things I love about this particular series. And yeah, absolutely the ties to literature. I mean, the fact that it introduces me to so many more authors, that's really, really important. And I think in the beginning, I remember mentioning this on the show because I'm like, I'm totally wrong. Like now that I have dived into two characters that we're going to talk about later a little bit more, I feel like at first I thought like, oh, like it's just okay. So they are based on real characters, they're based on real authors, and they, like you said, mentioned took their ability from like one of their most famous work. But I thought it was at first I thought there was just more like that's kind of it, like the characters are. But like now that I have like kind of gone into like knowing a little bit more about some of the specific characters, I started to realize how much the author has actually put into this and really try to craft their characters based on not just like a single word that they have, but also like the real life person and just taking some of the experiences into the character. And I'll talk more about that in when I talk about my characters. But yeah, like so I find that really, really interesting. Like, that there's a lot more to what I thought at first. It's just like, oh yeah, so they're the same name, like they have like a special ability, but there's a lot more to it. So I really, really, really love that. So yeah, so I'm glad that like it inspire, I'm sure not just me, but many people to go and seek out these offers and just to find out like who they are, and read some more books. And that is always something that we love. So yeah, so very, very excited about this. So I think we should go into like maybe some of our books because the listeners are probably waiting. Okay, how long are you gonna talk about Bungo Stray Dog for? We're gonna go into our books by basically talking about some of our favorite or maybe just some characters that we could get our hands on in the book. So I think the first one, Emma, maybe I don't know which one you're gonna go first, but the first book that you're gonna talk about, I think is also a book by your favorite character, I think. Okay.
So I said before that my favorite character is this character named Chuya Nakahara. And my favorite characters they're almost always bad guys. I mean, like the good guys are fine, but the bad guys are so complex. There's so much more like inner turmoil happening, in my opinion. But my like ultimate kind of favorite character archetype is like an anti-hero or like a bad guy that like I named my cat Prince Zuko. I love a bad guy that has like a growth arc, a redemption arc. Not to say that Chuya has had a redemption arc, but Chuya has had, in my opinion, a very fascinating story arc. Because in the character Chuya in Bungo Stray Dogs, because in his childhood he was closer to a character who's one of the good guys now, to Dazai. They work together as members of the Port Mafia, and then Dazai leaves the Port Mafia and leaves Chuya kind of by himself. And there's a lot of tension and a lot of resentment that Chuya has for Dazai after that. So he's a very fascinating character because, like, he is technically a bad guy. He's technically a member of the Port Mafia, but he has this, like, very, very close tie to Dazai, who's technically a good guy. And it just, like, it creates all of this drama and homoerotic tension, and I love it so much. So that's one of the reasons that Chuya, the character, is someone that I really love. He's extremely chaotic. I like to say that I really like characters that are chaos kings, characters that are just like a little bit insane, a little bit wacky. Those are typically who I really like. And his ability, in my opinion, his like special ability is one of the most fascinating in the entire show. So his ability is called Upon the Tainted Sorrow, which is based on a poem the translated title in the collection that I have here today is called Soiled Sorrow. It's like tainted sorrow, soiled sorrow. But his ability is gravity manipulation, which is just like the absolute coolest thing that you could ever be able to do. He can manipulate the gravity of his own body so he can make himself fly. He often makes himself like standing upside down from the ceiling like a bat. He can manipulate the gravity of things around him. So like he can touch something, make it float, and then touch it again to make it extremely heavy, and then it becomes a weapon. His power is just like there's infinite possibilities of things that he can do. But his ability also has a true form. So this ability, Upon the Tainted Sorrow, is kind of a limited version of his true form, which is called corruption. And corruption is this is something Virginia said before that she realized after doing research for this episode that like these characters are so deeply connected to the literature that they're based off of and to the authors. And I found in my research that Upon the Tainted Sorrow, the gravity manipulation power isn't that closely tied to the poem. But then when you look at the way that corruption, that the true form works, that is where the poem kind of comes in and the themes from his writing come in. So corruption is more connected to the poem Soiled Sorrow than the original ability, which I'll get into more detail in a little bit. But Chuya, the character, he's kind of, to describe him a little bit, he's short, he's got very tacky style. He's a little bit annoying, kind of comes back to the Chaos King thing that I love about him. He's a little bit of a drunk. He's very melodramatic. But after reading the introduction in this book about the actual Chuya Nakahara in his biography, these are all words that have been used to describe the real Chuya Nakahara. So the author was very very much based not only Chuya's appearance, but his personality, his backstory a little bit, very much on the real author. So about the real Chuya Nakahara, he was a poet living in Japan from 1907 to 1937. So he died quite young. He was only 30 years old. And he was a symbolist and Dadaist poet. So a lot of his stuff, to be frank, a lot of his stuff probably went over my head a little bit. It was a little bit obscure. I think if I had studied this in like a literature class in my undergrad, I would have really gotten into it. But for reading just kind of on the SkyTrain, I was like, this is poetry. But it was really cool to try to kind of find connections between Chuya the character and the stuff he wrote about in his poems. So during his lifetime, his poems were deemed obscure by critics and by the public. He only published one collection before his death, and then a second collection was published after his death. But those are the only two collections that have ever been published. And I think both of them are compiled in this book that I have, which is just called The Poems of Chuya Nakahara. And since 1945, so since a little bit after his death, his work has actually risen from relative obscurity to being a more central part of the Japanese canon of Japanese modernism. So he wasn't popular at all, really, while he was still alive, but his poems have become more popular in the Japanese canon since his death. Sometimes his poems are characterized as using straightforward colloquialisms, but I didn't necessarily find it super straightforward, but I was also reading a translation. So it could be different when you're reading it in the original Japanese. They have a really unique rhythm to them, and they often have a lot of themes of like sorrow and sentiment, which connects back to Chuya the character and his ability and a bit more about his personality. The Chuya, the author, was raised Catholic, which I think wasn't super common in Japan at the time. And he was very spoiled. He was the first son in his family, and he had many siblings after that. So he was kind of the spoiled first child. And he was spoiled well into adulthood. He was very much financially supported by his parents his whole life, which kind of gave him the opportunity to like not really have a proper job, just kind of mess around, get drunk all the time, write some weird poetry that he could never get published. And that was kind of Chuya's whole thing. He had a lot of failed relationships with women, which I think is something that they kind of tie back to the character. It's been a long time since I've read the manga or watched the show, but I'm pretty sure at least once the character Dazai makes fun of Chuya for being bad with girls. Am I making this up? This feels familiar to me. I feel like Dazai teased Chuya about this kind of stuff before. But it was kind of funny to read his bio in this book because it's like, oh, he wouldn't have a job. He would just get drunk all the time. He would follow his friends around and then they get annoyed with him. And I'm like, that's Chuya the character. It's so accurate, which is really fun to learn. And let me see where I'm at. It seems like he was he kind of loathed how he was raised. He has a poem in the book called Miscreant Song, where he's quite critical of the clumsy gardeners who raised him. And there was a line that kind of stuck with me from that. It said, "Thanks to that, most of my blood rises to my head, seething, boiling over." So it seems like there was quite a bit of resentment that he had for his parents for how he was brought up, which is interesting to me given that he was so like financially dependent on them for his entire life. Let's see what else I have about Chuya. He had this overbearing personality. He would often get really drunk and provoke fights with other people, but he was very small, so his fights would not usually end in his favor, which is something that Chuya the character has in common with him. Although because Chuya the character has this awesome gravity manipulation power, he does usually win his fights, but he is very easily provoked. And similar to the character Chuya again, he is always made fun of for being small. He's quite hot-headed, easy to anger, and also sometimes easy to manipulate and overpower. So it was fascinating for me to kind of do a deep dive into Chuya, the author, and draw these similarities between the way that the character is characterized and real things about the author's bio and personality. So some of the themes in his poems, I said before that they were quite obscure, but these are some themes that were discussed in his like introductory bio at the beginning of the book. He talks a lot about loss of children. Chuya ended up having two sons while he was alive. One of them died in infancy of tuberculosis, and after his first son died, he kind of suffered from a nervous breakdown that he never fully recovered from. Um, he ended up being hospitalized. He had a second son that was born shortly after this, but had the second son's birth did nothing to mitigate the pain that he felt from the loss of his first son. Um, his second son, I think, was born in like 1936 or 1937. And in 1937, Chuya was incarcerated at a sanatorium where he eventually died of tuberculosis as well. And his second son actually also died the following year. So there's a lot of tragedy, a lot of like death of children that happened in his life, both before and after he died. And a lot of those themes you can see in the poems that he wrote after his first son died. There's a lot of themes about dead children, children being angels, and a lot of that kind of sorrow and melancholy translates into his writing. So looking more closely at the poem Upon the Tainted Sorrow, or the translated title Soiled Sorrow, which, like I said before, is the namesake for his power. A lot of that poem is about sadness, there's a lot of loneliness. He talks about having no desires or wishes and waiting for a slow death. So like a kind of sadness that cannot be remedied. It's quite a depressing poem. Um, but on this, and it's interesting to think that like, oh, this is the poem that the author then based a power that's all about gravity manipulation on. You can't, it's kind of hard to see what the ties are there. But like I said earlier, Chuya's got this second ability called corruption, and there's more themes to corruption that are more closely tied to the poem. So corruption as an ability is essentially an overpowered version of his original gravity manipulation, where he can increase the density around him to the point where he could use his body to crush a tank. He can also create these like black holes, or they call them balls of compressed gravity. So they're essentially like black holes of empty space that he can then throw at his opponents. This ability in the anime and in the manga is activated by reciting a line from another poem of Chuya's called Sheep Song. I don't know the exact translation, but the one I have is "You allow sorrow to corrupt." And once he's activated this power, he can't control it. He can't control this sorrow, this feeling that he has, without the help of your friend and mine, Osamu Dazai. So Dazai's power, no longer human, is the ability to nullify other abilities. And so Chuya and Dazai, I said earlier, they worked together closely at the Port Mafia when they were children. They were teenagers, I think. But they kind of are like the perfect match for one another, because when Chuya uses corruption, he can't stop using it until it kills him. He like physically cannot stop himself. And when I was analyzing it, I was reading a little bit of other people's analyses on the internet, and someone said that it's his loneliness that kills him. This is something that they took from the poem, and with it, in order to like remedy that loneliness, that's how he can survive. So he can only survive with the help of somebody else, with Dazai. So like you could probably assume based on what I've said that like I love this character because he relies on this other man that he may or may not be in love with. Um, and they have to work together in order for Chuya to like very literally survive his ability. So that's my whole spiel about my boy Chuya Nakahara, both the real Chuya Nakahara and his actual poetry, and also the Chuya Nakahara of Bungo Stray Dogs that I love so dearly.
I love it. I know you love, and of course because I know you love him, and because I love Dada, I'm always on Dada's side, obviously, like in this little rivalry. But yeah. But it's so fascinating. I love hearing you talk about Chuya's like the real Chuya, and just again, like you said, you see, the more you find out about these authors, the more you see how complicated and how complex they are. And even in like an anime that is, looks like a shonen anime, like, there's so much more to them. And I think that what makes a lot of shows, I think that's why we love watching anime. That's why we love manga. I think there's so much more to them than just like the surface, like, oh, it looks like they're just like fighting one another, but there's like it's not. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna talk about my first book. Um, unfortunately, I have already talked about my favorite character, so I can't talk about it again. But ever since I
Tell us
started,
your favorite
yeah,
character,
I
Virginia.
will, I will. Yeah. So ever since I kind of like started like watching, and then I'm like, oh, like I've been sneaking these offers in throughout the podcast. So I already talked about three of them. There's Natsume Soseki, who appears as a cat for the longest time on the show. Because his, of course, the most famous book is I Am a Cat. But I did talk about his book, The Miner, on the free play episode last year. And then, of course, Osamu Dazai, as Emma mentioned, I talk about that on the TikTok episode. And I think that's might be the only offer I actually read prior to the show. I think. And then, of course, my favorite author, sorry, my favorite character, also my favorite author, I think, after reading all the books so far, still my favorite author that I talk about on the book with the word murder in the title episode, which is Ryosuke Akutagawa. I mean, it has to be Akutagawa. I think, as you mentioned, Emma, like I always like the bad guys more. They're always just more interesting. There's just something about them. But I have to say, like, I think a lot of the good guys' characters are also all very like they're also all very nuanced, but there's just something about those bad guys. They're just like a little bit more interesting. Anyway, so yeah, so Akutagawa, of course, like the most kind of famous kind of like member of Mafia. And I mean, one of my favorite thing about him, of course, is like you said earlier, Emma, his like just this desperate need for Dazai to approve him, to like give him praise. I love that so much. And I mean, like it's almost like every single thing, his incentive is just for Dazai to say you did good, right? And then like his whole rivalry with like with Atsushi is all about that, right? It's because like he's jealous. Like it's like, yeah, so it's just it's
I think the character, sorry to interrupt. I
no,
think
no,
the character Akutagawa is like the embodiment of the notice me senpai meme or the notice me senpai trope. Like all he wants is for Dazai to look at him and love him and appreciate
no.
him. Can you not see the homoerotic tension?
But it's interesting because in real life, it's the reverse, right? Because it's Dazai who is like just a big admirer of Akutagawa. And so yeah, so it's interesting how how the author plays with this. But yeah, so that's my favorite. But I already talked about him, so I can't. So I'm gonna go into some other characters that I won't say they're necessarily my favorite. I think this next one might be one of mine, but like, but they're the ones that we could get books on. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Because unfortunately, there's some characters that I would love to read about, but their works are not as readily available in English. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get to some of them. Anyway, so I'm going to like just because I know Emma's going to do Chuya, so it has like poetry. So I'm going to do another poetry kind of recommendation here. And this is Akiko Yosano. So a lot of the characters in on Bungo Stray Dog is male. They are male, but like there are two of my favorite is definitely Yosano and also Kyoka. Like I think I love those two a lot. I love Demon Snow so much. Anyway, so Yosano is the one that I did end up reading a book for today. And I think this is the one, as I'm learning more about Yosano's life, this is how I really realized, oh my gosh, like I completely miss so much that the author put into creating these characters. So Yosano on the series, she is the doctor on the detective agency, and every one of them is like super scared of her, especially even when she's trying to like heal you and make you feel better. They are like deeply afraid of her because her medical treatments are never quite conventional, to say the least. We don't actually see what happened ever, but all you will see is like these other people kicking and screaming as she dragged them into the surgery room, and then all you will hear is this blood curdling screams of all the patients that are like whatever they're doing in there is who knows, but like Yosano definitely has a little bit of this sadistic side to her, and she loves seeing people get hurt because she knows that she'll have a chance to fix them in whatever her way is. So her ability is called Thou Shall Not Die, and it is her ability to heal anybody. But the interesting thing about it is that her ability works best when you're almost dying, like when you are like super injured. So if you're not very injured, she has to like injure you first. Yeah. Make sure make it so that you are like almost dying and then she can fix you. So maybe that's why they're all afraid. But So this her ability is based on one of her poems called, Thou Shalt Not Die, which is not included in the collection that I read for today, but it is somewhat to reflect her, like, and as a doctor on the show, is her really like intense belief in the value of a human, on the human life. Yosano wrote this poem as an anti-war poem, and many people criticized her for that because she was writing this poem for her brother when her brother has to go into fight in the war, was being sent to fight. She write to him and just say, like, like, thou shalt not die, please don't die, because, and then she start commenting on how, like, why is this country sending people away to the death? Like, why is the emperor, if they care about the people, why are you so, like, like, readily sending people to die? And so it was a very anti-war poem, and she's always been that. And so that's like sort of what the poem is, and her ability is based on, and that's how she heal people, because she really believes that every like human has a value, and that we should not just like waste it like this. It's a very controversial piece. And of course, then I realized later on in the story, I don't know, Emily, where you got to that part, but when we get a chance to know Yosano's backstory, is that she actually started off working with Mori Ogai, the leader of now the Port Mafia, and they were actually in the military together. And because they know that her ability is to heal people, so they will have all the soldiers, they would just send them to, like, to battles, and then they'll bring them back, get her to heal them, and they will send them back out again. And this is something that has really, of course, traumatized her, like, because like she just keep sending all these people to their death over and over and over again. And so, again, I realized, yeah, like how much even just incorporated into her backstory on the show, on the series, it really kind of like showcased like sort of that side of Yosano, and how much she is like, against war, against like sort of the, this waste of human life. So Akiko Yosano is most famous as a poet. She's most famous for, like, and I think they said like kind of reshaping the traditional tanka. And so tanka is translated directly as short poems, and they're kind of like these 5 lines poems, and they follow a specific pattern of syllables, like, how many syllables they have to have in each line. And it's been a very, very like a long-standing form, poetry form in Japan, but it's sort of like didn't has lost sort of his popularity. But like, she and a bunch of other people are sort of like responsible for reviving that when she was writing the poem. So the collection that I read is called Tangled Hair. And this is just a selected tanka from Yosano, and it's translated by Sanford Goldstein and Seishi Shinoda. And in the introduction of the book, it talks about Yosano's life a little bit. And one of the main things that they mention is that she has kind of this, she's involved in this love triangle. Her husband probably cheated on her like numerous times, especially with her best friend, Tomiko. So this is a thing like for a lot of and what I really find like really interesting, because I don't really read a lot of poetry, but what I find really interesting is that within a very structured and a rigid kind of structure of the tanka, she's able to express so much emotions and so much feelings. And so even though it seems like a very like structured, like kind of traditional thing, she's able to kind of bring that passion to her like work. And I really, really like that. I find myself actually really enjoying many of her poems. But a lot of them has to do with sort of this love triangle that she's stuck in. She's never left her husband. She's kind of stuck with him the whole time. But I'm sure it is not fun. And Yosano is also like a known to be a feminist. And so for the first time, a lot of her poems, and a lot of in Japanese poetry talks about like, like just sort of celebrating the female and the female body, which is not something that is very like very off, like very frequent in Japanese poetry. And so even the title poem itself, Tango Hair, is about like, because when you are like, everybody's supposed to be proper, like all females are supposed to be like proper and all that. So like she's writing about a person that has tangled hair that is all like messy and, just a little bit out of place. And that is supposed to be like just a sign that, like this woman must be like amoral and like, all that kind of stuff. But like, she writes about that. She writes about sort of someone, and she's trying to like, kind of break out of those stereotypes, also like those kind of like what is the expectations that the society has for her and every other woman. So that's I find that very, very interesting in her books. Um, and yeah, like I mean, like for example, one of the ones it's after Tomiko died, her best friend, and also possibly the person that like her husband is having an affair with. So there's a poem that she wrote. She called "That Secret We Sealed in a Jar, the three of us, my husband, myself, and the dead one." And I just find like just like in 5 lines, there's just so much packed into it. And she can't even name the person, even though that was once her best friend. And I really, really love like, her just like it's so intense, and so personal and so intense. And I just find it so interesting when you're writing in this like, like the specific kind of like 5 line poem, and that you have to have like like to follow the structure, but yet she breaks out of it by like the what she writes about. So I was actually quite surprised that I enjoy this poetry collection as much as I do. And I think now that I know a little bit more about her, I know a bit more about like like, and I definitely appreciate her character. Like she was already pretty cool on the show, but like I think I definitely appreciate her a lot more now than before. So yeah, and also appreciate what the manga artist did with all these characters. So yeah. So yeah, so that is our first recommendation for one of the books that we read based on the character. So before we move on to the next book, I'd love to ask Emma. So Bungo Stray Dogs, for most of them, including whether it's the Japanese authors or the North American or the European authors, they're mostly like I would say kind of classics. They're the essentials, the household names, all the ones that people pretend to have read, that they have, everybody's heard of, but we're just like never actually read the same book. So I would love to know, if they were to put some and this is, of course, just an excuse to introduce authors to everybody. If they were to put some contemporary Japanese authors into Bungo Stray Dog, who would you like to see, and what would their ability be?
I'm glad you asked this question. But it was kind of hard to answer because I didn't want to just be like, oh, this author because I like them. I'd have to be like, but what's their ability going to be? I have to come up with an ability if we're putting them in Bungo Stray Dogs. So I thought very, very hard about this. And I think 3 kind of options. We got some stuff to work with. The first one is I know Virginia, you may not be as into these types of books, but I quite enjoy the like very cozy Japanese like magical realism books. Some of them are magical realism, some of them are more just like cozy fiction. Often this story structure is like it'll be 4 little narratives. Each of these narratives is about a character interacting with one specific person or going to one specific coffee shop, and like the things that happen because of them, but they're very like heartwarming, kind of like wholesome little like warm hug type of stories, that may or may not make you cry as well. And I like this kind of stuff for when I'm in a reading slump or I'm just sad or I just want to read something really wholesome. Um, so I really enjoyed the Before the Coffee Gets Cold book. I've actually only read the first one. I haven't gotten to the rest of the series yet. But I think it'd be fun to see Toshikazu Kawaguchi in the anime and in the manga. That's the author of Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And the ability that I came up with is that he can travel in time, but he can only stay as long as his coffee is still hot, much like in the story itself. Once his coffee cools, he ends up just kind of zapping back to the present. So thinking of character design, this man always has a very, very large mug of coffee with him. He is like, I would think he'd kind of go back and forth from being like very, very drowsy to being like jittery. Like I'm way too caffeinated all the time. So he might be a little bit erratic, might be a little bit wacky. Um, Always carries a large thermos. He likes his coffee black and extra hot. And he's someone who's quite cheerful, but he also cries a lot, like very sentimental, very emotional. And he just really, really loves to help people. Someone with a very wholesome personality, but also with a very severe caffeine addiction. So that is my Bungo Stray Dogs version of Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I love character design. I think it's so fun. When I was in high school and got really into the anime Bleach, I was like, oh, if I was a Bleach character, this is what my character would be. Like, I love this kind of stuff. So this was the perfect question. Um, my second one is the author of What You Are Looking For is in the Library. So Ariyama. And I thought less about this one. I actually haven't even finished this book yet. It's one that I checked out, and then my book was due and people had it on hold, so I haven't gotten back to it. But for an ability, I was thinking an ability that I would love to have, the ability to manifest any book, any document, any piece of literature that you might ever need, but you have to be standing inside of a library. So you can't just like use it all the time. You have to like walk into a library and then you can use the ability, but you can just like manifest whatever book you're looking for just out of thin air. And my third one, and oh, for this character though, for Michiko Ariyama, she would have like kind of a weird personality. She'd be a little bit eccentric. She likes felting, like the character in the book, and she would look like a Studio Ghibli character, be kind of like round and plump and have a very like squish mellow looking face. And then my third one, I totally ripped this one off of the anime Hunter x Hunter, but Hunter x Hunter has a character named Basho who has a poetry power. So why can't Bungo Stray Dogs have a Basho as well? And those are my three options.
Yeah, you think like Basha would be perfect, right? Like, because it is also like a classic, like essential kind of like master. So yeah,
I'm surprised they don't already have a
right?
Basho. Because the Hunter x Hunter version of Basho, I think his power is like he writes a poem and then that poem becomes reality. But it has to be I think he writes haikus. So it's like it has to be a very specific type of poem.
Do you think
Uh,
it's like maybe too close to Kunihira then? Like, because whatever he writes, right? Like maybe that's why they're like, oh, well, I guess we have to find someone else.
but that's only if they use so that's what Basho's power is in Hunter x Hunter. So that would only be the case if they use the exact same power, but they could come up with a new ability, I would think. But yeah, I'm quite surprised that Bungo Stray Dogs doesn't already have a Basho.
Oh. You fought so hard on this. I feel like so bad because I'm like, I really don't have much to say about this.
I had so much fun with this question.
I'm so glad and I love it. I would love to see, like, like, especially like when you're describing them, like, I would love to see, like, especially, of course, since I love coffee and you love coffee, like, the first one, definitely, I would love to see that. For me, I mean, the first person that came to mind, and this is like totally a cop out, is Junji Ito. Because I feel like he would be perfect, right? Like, I mean, like, he would be very, very scary, I think.
He'd be a villain. See, my first two would definitely be like
Yeah.
armed detective agency
Yeah.
characters. Junji Ito would be a villain.
Right? And I just feel like because they have like Lovecraft on there, right? So like they could totally put Junji Ito in there. And I would think that like, I mean, his is so many things of his manga. If you haven't seen it, like it's great. Like it's just like disturbing, very disturbing. And he also of course
We
did.
should, but for those who don't know, Junji Ito is like the mangaka that is like the king of horror.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like and of course he also did a manga adaptation of No Longer Human, which was amazing. Yeah, like I remember interlibrary loan that I was so excited, and I showed it to Korean, and Korean just gave me this face, like she was so disgusted at it. She's just like, what the hell? But yeah, like I think he's great. And I think for me, like Spiral would probably be like something to tie with that because that to me is I think that was probably my first Junji Ito manga, like Uzumaki. So I think that's why Spiral is always going to be what I associated with him. So that would be some of his ability. But he could create so many scary things because it's Junji Ito. And then the other person I was thinking about again, just because I love this author, is Yoko Ogawa. Yoko Ogawa wrote like The Housekeeper and the Professor, which I love. And then she's also the writer of like some novellas, and then some short stories, and also The Memory Police, which I talked about on this show before. And so I would think that her ability would have something to do with like being able to manipulate memory, being able to like make sure because in the story it is about a town that things just start disappearing, and so the memory police go around to ensure that things have disappeared, that people don't remember any of it. So I feel like that would be her ability to, and I don't know whether she'll be probably an armed detective agency, but like she'll be able to make you forget things. that's she, that they want you to forget. So I feel like that might be, and I feel like maybe once, because many of those characters, they were originally Port Mafia and then they kind of switch over, right? So maybe she'll be one of those too that like, her ability was being used for like, nefarious purposes and then they may get switch over. I don't know. But yeah, so that would be my two offers. So all right, Emma. Do you have a second character that you want to talk about? I don't know how many that you end up doing, but like do you have another character that you want to talk about and the book that you read? Okay.
Mhm.
Cool.
I do have two. I have two total. I have one more in addition to Chuya. I apologize ahead of time because Chuya is my favorite, and I like really put my heart and soul into that one. This one might be a little bit more like, and this is how the character is similar. It might be a little bit more chaotic. But when am I not chaotic? So you guys expect this at this point. So for my second one, I read a story by Atsushi Nakajima, who is the protagonist of Bungo Stray Dogs. So Virginia gave quite a bit of backstory about Atsushi, the character, at the beginning of the episode. He's the one who turns into the man-eating tiger. So he is I mean, there's so many characters in this show and in this manga, but he's kind of the main character introduced at the very beginning. So I thought it would be appropriate if at least one of us spoke about him. And since I really like the show. I really like his story. He's not my favorite character, but since he's kind of the central figure that everybody else revolves around, I was like, I should read this short story. Like, if I'm a Bungo Stray Dogs fan, I should read The Moon Over the Mountain. Um, so Atsushi Nakajima was an author living from 1909 to 1942. He also died quite young, much like Chuya did. And he was a novelist and a teacher. So a lot of his writing is mostly inspired by classical Chinese stories. A lot of classical Chinese mythology kind of translates into his work, as well as his own personal life experiences. So I think his most famous story is called The Moon Over the Mountain. And this is actually The Moon Over the Mountain is also used as the title for his short story collection. So I don't have the book with me anymore because it was an interlibrary loan. But the book itself is called The Moon Over the Mountain, and I read the titular story for it. It's also sometimes called Tiger Poet. So this book is a collection of short stories. And The Moon Over the Mountain is also the namesake of Atsushi's ability, like Virginia mentioned, which grants him the power to turn into a man-eating tiger under the moonlight. So the moon over the moonlight, tiger ability, all this good stuff. He does gradually learn to control it, so he can kind of transform in and out of tiger form at will to an extent. He doesn't have complete control over it. And actually, one of the reasons he joins the Armed Detective Agency is because Dazai's nullifying ability is a good way to help him learn how to control his power. Because Dazai can kind of just get him out of it if he ever can't get himself out. So a bit about the author, Nakajima. He was considered a master of storytelling when ancient China is the subject. A lot of his works were based off of folk tales and legends and Chinese historical figures. And the story, The Moon Over the Mountain, focuses on this character named Li Zhang, who is a very talented and learned man, living in the year 755. Li Zhang was extremely ambitious. He pursued a position working in the government. And after becoming a government official, he decided, maybe this isn't for me. And he wanted to dedicate his life to writing poetry instead. So he ends up becoming a recluse. He moves back to his hometown and kind of cuts ties with pretty much everyone in his life aside from his immediate family. But he soon learned that finding literary fame wasn't as easy to gain as he expected. So he's got all of these different ambitions, but being a government official wasn't really working for him. He's found it really hard to be a poet, to be a really successful poet. So over the years, he becomes more and more irritable. In the story, his face becomes harsh and cruel. His body becomes emaciated. And aside from the cruelty, he also is as the character goes on, as he becomes like gradually more and more kind of irritable because he isn't finding success as a poet, he also becomes more anxious and more alone, which is something that pretty closely connects to Atsushi the character, as we're introduced to him at the beginning of the Bungo Stray Dogs story. He's very anxious. He's starving. Dazai finds him on the street, pretty much on the brink of death because he hasn't eaten in days and he is alone. So these are things that are also happening to Li Zhang in the story. So after Li Zhang's failed career as a poet, he takes yet another position in the government to try to support his family. But his self-esteem was really severely wounded by all of his kind of the building failures that he's having in his life. And he was unable to suppress what's described as a half-mad egotism. So this is a man with so much ambition who is kind of continually failing at achieving the things that he's seeking out to achieve. So it starts to drive him a little bit crazy. After a year of attempting to be a government official again, he ends up running away. This time, instead of going back to his hometown, he runs away to the mountains where he finally goes mad. He finally loses it. Um, we are introduced to another character named Yuan Khan, who's an inspector in the area who has heard of stories of a man-eating tiger. So this is where we're bringing it all together back to the Bungo Stray Dogs narrative. So Yuan Khan goes out into the woods to try to find this tiger, and in the mountains, he encounters this tiger who starts speaking gibberish to him. The tiger turns out to be Li Zhang, who claims that he's turned into a tiger due to his cowardly pride and arrogant shame, which he's been harboring after his kind of multiple failed careers. His failed poetry career, his failed careers as a successful government official. Li Zhang delivers a very long monologue about his failures to Yuan Khan, including a few poetry recitations. And then he asks Yuan Khan to leave and never return, for if he did, Li Zhang, as the tiger, would eat him. So some of the themes in this story are like this cowardly pride that Li Zhang has, this arrogant shame that causes him to turn into a tiger. And as I was reading it, I was learning that Atsushi, the character from Bungo Stray Dogs, isn't necessarily as connected to Atsushi Nakajima, the author, but more so connected to kind of the themes in this story. Atsushi shares a lot more character traits with the character Li Zhang than I think he does with Atsushi Nakajima's like real life and real personality. He's got this similar kind of cowardly pride. At the beginning of the story, especially, he's afraid of everything. When he gets into confrontations with other characters, though, he's often like, "Oh, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I can help people," but he's not. He's got this kind of warring like insecurity and weakness that is conflicting with this pride that he has where he's like, I need to be the one helping everybody. And it's like, no, Atsushi, you can't control your power. Um, so it's kind of interesting to see how Li Zhang's characterized in the story as being like both extremely egotistical and proud, but also being very weak and a coward. And that to me was very similar to Atsushi the character. Because Atsushi the character often, in my opinion, in my reading of him, his ego gets in the way of him making safe and rational decisions a lot of the time. Atsushi, the character, is also very insecure. He carries a lot of shame with him, especially after being banished from his orphanage at the beginning. He can also be a little bit melodramatic. That's kind of a theme with a lot of characters in this anime. He can be a little bit whiny, a little bit, woe is me. And he's got a lot of self-doubt. And these are things that I saw in Li Zhang's like kind of long incomprehensible monologues that he was giving Yuan Khan in the story. There's a lot of the same like melodramatic, shameful insecurity coming out. Both characters share a lack of confidence, but with Atsushi, the character, he's also quite pure of heart. He has this like really strong commitment to trying to protect people. You see a lot of that in one of Virginia's favorite characters, Kyoka Izumi. Atsushi kind of develops this close relationship with Kyoka where he wants to keep her safe, he wants to protect her, especially since the Port Mafia is a little bit after her. And Atsushi has a lot of this emotional trauma from being abused in the orphanage, which kind of drives his desire to help people. So you can kind of see those similar like trauma narratives in both characters, but with Li Zhang, it kind of just drives him, kind of just drives him to the woods where he then goes mad. While with Atsushi, that's like his backstory, but he's able to like push himself to help people because of it. It kind of works as a motivating factor for his character. He also thinks he can help everyone, which is a bit more typical of an anime protagonist. But it works when you kind of pair that with this like pure of heart kind of nature that he has. So, like I said earlier, Atsushi the character, it seems to be a lot more like Li Zhang from the story than the author himself. But that was just after my reading of it. So that was The Moon Over the Mountain by Atsushi Nakajima.
Thank you. Yeah, when I insufferable that one, that's the same one. I only got to read the story. Um, that's, like, I know that like his abilities based on. I didn't get to read the other one. So I will have to probably interlibrary loan that one again so that I can read his other stories and see what they are like. All right. So my next character, my next book, it's definitely I mean I love them all, but they're like not on my top. But I bought the book like so long time ago, and then I have it at my home already. I'm like, you know what, this is gonna be my chance to read it. So the next character, the next author, the book I read for today is from Kenji Miyazawa, and so this is the collection of selected stories. Translated by John Bester and published by New York Review of Books. Because I have it, I'm just like, okay, well, I should just like read it. So the character of Kenji in Bungo Stray Dog, he looks probably like most like a kid to me. He always just looks like a kid. He's like wearing. Yeah. Oh, is he? Is he 14? Okay, Emma was just telling me that he's
Yeah,
actually supposed to
I
be.
think the character is like 14 or 15. I think he's an
Okay.
actual child.
Okay, so that's why he looks like that. Okay, all right. Blue overalls, barefoot with a straw hat, like his family lives as like cow herders in the countryside. And so he was kind of recruited by the arm agency after they learned that he kind of single-handedly saved his village. And so he's like always smiling, always so friendly, always so good natured. I feel like of all the armed detective agents, like we talked about earlier, they are all very nuanced, but I feel like Kenji is very like just this is who he is. Like, what you see is just, yeah, super straightforward. Kunikida is kind of like that, but I think there's a little bit more to him. I feel like maybe just because he has more stuff going on. But Kenji is just this like very, very like happy person, and he's so sincere, and he truly believes in the goodness of everybody. And so his way very often of like trying to interrogate people or trying to like, like solve cases is like he's just being so straightforward. He's being so straightforward with everybody that somehow he gets, by being so sincere, he gets like information from them. And so it's just in his own way. Always, always so happy. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have like, like a ragey side, because if you so threaten his friends, like he's just gonna switch. And his ability is this super strength that he has. So you often see him, lifting cars and throwing things around, just because he has this super strength on him. And his ability is called Undefeated by the Rain. And it is based on one of his most famous poems that they found in his notebook that he probably wrote on his deathbed. And the poem describes kind of how he thinks he tries to live his life, like, and sort of the principles that he goes by, and how he wanted, like he thinks that like people should be, and again, like I mentioned, very, very close to the character, like really do believe in the goodness of everybody. So the poem begins with the first two lines: "Be not defeated by the rain, nor let the wind prove you better. Succumb not to the snows of winter, nor be bested by the heat of summer." So he talks about then, like, go on to like, like we're there to help people. Give somebody from the east, from the west, to the south, from the north, they need your help. You go help them, and don't be so full of yourself. And just so like a lot of like kind of principles that he lives by as a person. And that's something that he wrote down kind of just when he knows that he probably is not long for this world. Um, Miyazawa is a poet, is a novelist, is a children's stories writer. A lot of his stories has been made into like cartoons for kids. But as I think as many of the introduction points that are in this book too, even though they could be like stories could be read by kids, doesn't mean that they are always just for kids. Adults could get a lot of it out of it. In fact, maybe more, because again, you're reading it from like a different perspective, you have different kind of frame of references. So you could see a lot more perhaps in his collection. And having read, these are all like, there's about like 30 stories in it. It's a fair, most of his stories are quite short. So they're very like kind of like, I can see why they would think there's like kid stories or like fables type kind of stories. But all of them, you can see Miyazawa's interest and his kind of like his so-called life principles are very, very evident in his stories. And it's what I love the most, I think, about many of them is that no matter what's happening in the stories, he always takes the time to describe nature a little bit, throughout the stories. And this is something that he really, really enjoys, like he's a big, like he's big on nature. And you could see that, like, like he will pause and he will just talk about, like, maybe a flower blooming. He will talk about like something that indicate a change of season. He'll talk about like stars just whizzing by. And I'm sure they're all very metaphoric, but in some ways he's also just like, yeah, no matter what's going on, like no matter what's happening in this in the world, nature is always there. It's going to do its thing, and just let's take the time to just appreciate that. And I quite like really, really like sort of that side of the stories, because all of them are already kind of fable like, so they're full of like anthropomorphic animals and plants, but also objects, because he lives in a time when Japan is just opening up to the Western world. They're opening up to kind of industrialization. So a lot of things are kind of changing in his country. And so he's living in a time that, like facing all these changes. So a lot of objects, even in his books, are anthropomorphic. Miyazawa is known to be an idealist. He's also an anti-capitalist. He refused to inherit his family's business, for example. He's also very quite religious, and all those things kind of, again, all his beliefs show up in his book. And just like reading about Yosano's life, I so much more appreciate, I think, the character of Kenji and the effort that Kafka Asagiri, the creator of Bungo Stray Dog, put into his characters, because I feel like it's not just referencing that one ability, but everything. Like the characters really embodies sort of what Miyazawa, the real author, kind of believes in, and I really appreciate that. So as I mentioned, many of these stories are fables. They're already quite short, but because Miyazawa is also a poet, so a lot of the writing is also quite poetic. And what I love about these fables is that there's, again, not a straightforward good and bad kind of thing. I mean, of course, many of them do have a moral kind of attached to it, but underneath, like, sort of the story, there's also like, like a bit of sadness, a bit of loss in it. And also a lot of people, a lot of stories kind of end up like with a bit of remorse, for not kind of living up, to some of the things that we believe is true. Many of the stories has these, like, like animals that are like being mean to each other, and then like always ends with them feeling like quite bad about it. One of the weirdest story was like this a narrator, and I don't even know whether it's an animal or not, but like they're listening to an owl talk about, like, describe a story, and I love owls, so I was just like, oh, an owl, but like the owl is like trying to narrate a story, and this like narrator is keep trying to like pick holes at his stories and trying to say like, well, that's not how that goes, and he every time he does that, he keep feeling bad about it. And so he'd be like, and then the owl would be a little sad, and he saw that, and he's like, oh, okay, well, tell me more, about something. And like he would try to get the owl to talk again. I just find that like super cute. So there's like stories like that. But there's always just a little bit of kind of like a little bit at the underneath, just like a little bit of sadness, a little bit of just like, like kind of like really thinking that like I didn't live the best like life that I could be. And so it's interesting to see that. There's also a lot of like, he can tell that he really do believe, like, just like the character in the series, really believe that humans are inherently good. That there's just this, like, that we can all be good people. We can all be nice to one another. So that's something that is quite evident in the story. But it's interesting because this collection begins with a story called The Earth God and the Fox, probably one of my favorite. And I was kind of a little bit surprised at sort of like the ending and what happened there. It's about a birch tree who has kind of two friends that come to visit the tree. One of them is a fox. And this fox, like I think the tree prefers the fox as the friend. And but the fox can't help himself. Like, he will just start boasting about things that he doesn't actually have, boasting about things that is not true. So, for example, and Emma, you will appreciate that it's interesting that a lot of the stories, when they talk about the nature side of things, they talk a lot about stars and planets and, like given like some of the an upcoming episode that we might be working on, it's funny that like to hear a lot of like they really describe they just don't say like stars, they actually name all the different like constellations. So it's interesting that way. Anyway, so the fox was like talking to the tree about like just astronomy and things like that, and like, oh, like when I get my telescope, I'll bring it, and so we can look at the sky a little more clearer. Well, there's no telescope coming. He doesn't have a telescope coming, but he just can't help it but like make things up, right? And then the other friend of the tree is an earth god. So it's allegedly a god. And the earth god is very jealous because every time he tries to go visit the tree, he would sometimes see the fox and like they seem to be having a good time. And he's just like mad. He's just mad. And he will like just be grumpy and he will like storm away because he's mad to see, his friend being friends with someone else. And like gradually he just couldn't stand this fox anymore, and then he did something that he regrets. So yeah, so there's something like that. So I was just like, oh, that's an interesting end to this story. I was not expecting that. And then there's another story as called I feel like when I'm talking about like, sometimes when we say, oh, like there's a lot of like nature in these books and you feel like everything is like nice and like, beautiful, which it is, but there's also like something like cute and funny in his stories too. So there's one called The First Deer Dance. It's about this, it was a story of like the first deer dance. And what happened was that there was a traveler in the woods and, he like finished eating his lunch and he has one dumpling left. And so he was like, okay, well, I'll leave the dumpling for the deers, and then they can have it. And so he started walking away when he realized that the deers are coming. And so he want to watch them. He want to observe them. So he hide himself in the bush to kind of like silently see what's going on. And these 5 deers came to surround this dumpling that he left, but none of them would go near it. They're kind of standing around in a circle and they would all kind of look very frightened and intimidated. And he wasn't sure why they're scared of a dumpling because it's just food. But it turns out that it wasn't the dumpling that freaks them out. It was that he has dropped a white towel on the ground. And so the deers have never seen a towel before. So they're trying to figure out like what this creature is, what this white creature is. So each of them, like one by one, take a turn to like step a little closer to the towel, to sniff it, to lick it, to try to see like what is this. But every time that they get too close, they will like jump away because they're scared. And so it looks like a little bit of a dance going on. So yeah, so there's something like that, which I thought was really, really quite cute. And then there's another story called like General Sanbayu. It's about, again, I think it's his a little bit of his statement about kind of like, again, similar to Yosano about war. There's a general who has been at war for so long. He's finally coming home. The war has finally ended, but because he has been a general for too long, he has basically his body is fused with the horse. And so when the kings send a messenger to welcome them back, he is supposed to, of course, get off his horse to like, kneel down or whatever to show his respect, but he couldn't get off his horse because he's stuck. His body is stuck with the horse. So he's trying to find a doctor to figure out like how you can like separate him and the horse. So there's like a story like that. And then there's another one called Gorge the Cellist, about a main character who's a very, very bad cello player. And he belongs to an orchestra and he's always get like, yelled at for like being like not in harmony with everybody else. He always get yelled at because he's like just a little bit too slow. And so he went home and he tried to practice at night. But all these animals keep interrupting him, and they keep trying to like get him to do things. Like, one of them was, oh, can you play this particular song? And the other one is, oh, can you like create a beat so that I can like, drum along with it. And so at first he was annoyed. He was like, I'm trying to practice. Why all these animals keep demanding things? And why are they coming into my house, uninvited? But, like slowly, like he realized that, like something that he does is actually helping the animals. And so, like it's kind of like gradually he also improved his music playing ability because of that. And then, so there's something like that. And of course, I don't think Emma, you know this, but for the longest time on this podcast a couple years ago, one of my themes, has always been cannibalism. Just for whatever reason, there's a lot of cannibal books. I don't
For
what.
listeners that don't know, Virginia and I both love the show Yellow Jackets.
Oh,
So like this is, I don't know how to say this without sounding super weird, but like this is a cannibalism friendly episode.
Yes, yes, it sure is. So for whatever reason, like just whatever books I end up having, they always have a little bit of cannibalism in it. Anyway, I did not expect reading Miyazawa that there is something close to that in here. So this is like it's in my last story I'm going to talk about. It's called The Restaurant of Many Orders, and it was really weird. I was watching another anime, and I can't remember which one because I have a bunch of series going on. That they were showing a scene in the classroom, and so they were like on the blackboard. It was written like the story and that they're studying, and it turns out to be like the Restaurant of Many Orders, which I was also reading at the same time. So that was really cool. And as Emma knows, everything is a sign. So I was just like, that's why I have to pick this. But anyway, so the Restaurant of Many Orders is about these two hunters who were like going hunting one day. They couldn't find anything, and so they were kind of getting lost in the forest, and they were like so tired, so hungry, and for what and they was kind of wandering around, and they came upon this restaurant which they have never seen before. They were like, that's weird. There's a restaurant in the middle of the forest. Anyway, they're so hungry. They're like, great, we can go get some food. So they walk in there, and then it's said that this is a restaurant of many orders. And they're like, oh, this must be a really popular restaurant, like they must have got a lot of customers. And so the sign said, please be patient with us. And they're like, okay, great. And so they walk in, and then there's a lot of doors, a lot of rooms, and every single door there's like a sign on it, telling them, like about their restaurant, a little bit about the restaurant, a little bit about what they have to do. So the first time was, oh, please, take off your shoes and put them right here. We have a space for you here. And they're like, oh, that's really nice. And then they go to the next one. It's like, oh, like we got some cream for you. Like please put it on your face and your body. And they're like, oh, I guess they worry about like us. And so, because we'll probably be like a lot of people have been like working all day. So they are like providing, I don't know, like moisturizer, like what is going on, right? So they were like confused, but they were like, okay, let's put these in. And then the next sign that said, oh, like we have provided some perfume for you, please spray yourself with it. And then they start spraying themselves. They're like, why does it smell so much like vinegar? There's something weird about this. And so as they walk in slowly, they walk in, and they're given a lot of like things that they have to do. And they realize that when they say the Restaurant of Many Orders is not a restaurant that has many customers that order a lot of food, it's actually a restaurant gives you a lot of orders. And as they go farther and farther in, they slowly realize that this is not a restaurant that you go eat at. This is a restaurant that you get eaten as you became food. Exactly. So that was a weird discovery in this book. I'm just like, that's a story. But there's like, it's like you can tell there's just a really like a wide variety of stories. Some sad, some funny. Like there's a lot. I think like probably one of my now that I read this, like maybe I think I definitely appreciate Miyazawa a little bit more on the show also. So yeah, so that is Once and Forever, The Tales of Kenji Miyazawa. As I said to Emma earlier, man, we could talk about Bungo Stray Dog forever. But we should wrap this up soon, I feel like. But
I have an
before
interview at 11, so we should.
okay, and I'm on desk at 11, so I really should. But before we go, are there any other Bungo Stray Dog offers that you're gonna read?
Yeah. So an author that I was planning on reading for the episode that I ended up being like, I don't have the time and I'll have enough to say about Chuya and Nakajima anyway. I was going to read Sakunosuke Oda for the episode as well. And he's a character who he kind of only briefly appears. He appears in like a backstory story in Bungo Stray Dogs, and then he, spoiler alert, dies. So he doesn't appear in the main storyline really at all. I do think he's reanimated at some point. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't caught up. But his ability in the anime and manga is called Flawless, which is taken from a short story that he wrote that the translated title that I saw was called Immaculate, but Immaculate, Flawless, kind of similar thing. And I don't really know much about it, but I was interested in reading it because the character is very fascinating. So that's one that I'll probably get to at some point. My sister has told me that she enjoys Junichiro Tanizaki, so I've considered checking him out as well. I think he also does novels and maybe some short stories. And that's a character who's a member of the Armed Detective Agency. He has a very cool ability that allows him to like create illusions, which is pretty fun. So per my sister Molly's recommendation, I might check him out. I have only read Rashomon by Kutagawa, so I would like to read more of his stuff, especially since he's your favorite, Virginia, and I trust your judgment. And you've like sold me on Kenji. I will totally read that Miyazawa short story collection because it sounds like a nice like I love kids literature. I'm a youth librarian. But it sounds like a nice blend of like kind of silly little animal stories with like a little bit of the banana pants, some like weird cannibalism things going on. Which is kind of like I enjoy cute little animal things. I enjoy before the coffee gets cold. I enjoy kind of the cutesy little wholesome stories. But as listeners of the podcast know, I also like things that are really freaking weird. So I think you really sold me on his collection as you were talking. He wasn't one that I'd really considered before doing the episode, but as you were going off about all the different stories, I was like, I am going to read these. So we'll add Kenji Miyazawa to the list. So what authors from the show are you oh actually I should also say I one of the books that's been on my TBR for a long time is The Brothers Karamazov. So if we do any sort of episode about like books that intimidate you, or I think you guys have done door stoppers before. So if we do another episode like that, then I'll probably get to hopefully maybe The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. But Virginia, I want to know what authors you're going to check out now.
Well, when you talk about Tanizaki, only because like I think his books are so readily available, so that would be a one that easy to find. I also want to know, like, because on the show there's his sister Naomi that has some very strange things going on there. So and his sister is based on one of the characters in his book. I think so I would love to
I think the
kind of
book is called
now,
Naomi.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
would love to probably read Naomi so that I can kind of do a 2-for-1 and just kind of learn about like what is the deal here between those two. I'll let the listeners discover that. So yeah, so that's probably one of my lists, just because again, like there's his books are very readily translated. I feel like I also need to read Adogawa Rambo. I mean, like I love him as a character, and I just feel like even though I'm not like a giant mystery fan, but I feel like to be able to read like somebody who's like so classic, like I think I would probably. And the other thing that I when I was looking through his stories, many of them are short stories. One of them is called The Human Chair. And I'm very curious about what that means. I didn't read anything about it because I want to like read the story to discover, but I want to know what is the human chair. So I think if I don't read a lot, at least I would read that story. And then the other one that I would never get to read because it's not really available is Kyosaku Yumeno. He is one of the characters on Port Mafia, and he shows up as definitely a child that they keep like basically like in like confinement because they don't want to let him out. But eventually they let him out because they needed his ability. He's basically like he makes you like kind of hallucinate, and then you do very very bad things because of his
Wait,
ability.
what's his ability?
Dogra Magra, that's his book. Um,
I don't know if I know this
yeah,
character.
he's late.
I'd have to look him up.
Probably
Yeah.
later in the series, yeah. But his book is only translated into French, and then there is a weird version that is translated from the French into English, but apparently it's a very very bad translation. Sorry, whoever you are that translated it. And it's also not really readily available, so apparently that's not. But Mark did say that there's a movie coming out, or movie that coming out, like oh it's already came out. So like he's like, oh, I ordered it for his library, so I've got to hold on that. So I'm waiting to watch it. But it's about a person who woke up in a sanatorium, not knowing his name, not knowing his face. He just can't remember anything. And so the doctors, and according to the synopsis, allegedly the two doctors, one of them supposedly is dead, is trying to subject him to all these different experiments to try to make him remember things. So it sounds very disturbing, and it sounds very psychological, and it sounds like right up my alley. So I'm probably gonna see what that movie is like, but I don't think the book will be available so unfortunately. So um, so there's like so many offers, that I would love to get my hands on. So yeah, we'll maybe one day, if it's just you and me, we'll have to do another part 2 of this and then talk about some other. I think we'll talk a lot. Okay, so just I know I have asked this one question before we go, and so I want to give you a chance to say it. Maybe we'll talk about one or two. But like, are there any other manga anime recommendations that you want to give? I know, short list, Emma, short list.
I had nothing prepared for this question because I was like, this is something I can just come up with on the top of my head. You guys all know, all of our listeners have heard me talk enough about Haikyuu and Yona of the Dawn, so I don't have to include those. But what other manga and anime recommendations do I have? If the Bungo Stray Dogs kind of general premise sounds interesting to you, like secret society with people with these weird magical abilities that are also super complicated magical abilities, then I think Hunter x Hunter is one that people would be interested in. That's another one. I think I don't know if it's a shonen or a seinen, but if it's meant for younger boys, it's definitely mature. So it's one that I would not recommend to children. I would only recommend to adults. But Hunter x Hunter is another one with a really fascinating magic system. They have a Basho character, so they do have some of these like literary references going on in it. But that's one of my favorites. It's a little chaotic. There's not a whole lot of overall story. It's very arc based. But if you're interested in one with like complex magical abilities and a lot of like really interesting fight scenes and very, very morally ambiguous characters, then Hunter x Hunter is another one that I think you could check out. Um, I don't have any others off the top of my head. Any others that are kind of similar to Bungo Stray Dogs? Because like I have so many manga and anime that I love that I think people should check out, but not a lot that would really connect back to this one. Because a lot, like I could list off a bunch of romance series to you right now, but if you like the action, if you like the magic that Bungo Stray Dogs brings, then something like Hunter x Hunter or something like Full Metal Alchemist, I think are really, really good recommendations. What do you have for us, Virginia?
Well, like since time is running short, I think mine would be because I love Osamu Dazai and who doesn't. So there's actually again like one that just came out in the last season is called No Longer Allowed in Another World. Is Osamu Dazai in an isekai manga slash anime. So he has been transported into another world, and it was actually when he was because I talked about it on the TikTok episode. He committed double suicide, and he was just in the middle of that when a giant bus came along, and that brought him to this other world. So now he's like he's an other worlder. So like, and then he's going around, and then like there's people welcoming. Oh, you know what? And he's like, he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to do anything. He just want to like take pills and like get drunk and whatever that guy does. And but like because he has got so much drugs and drinks and everything in him that he's like basically poison. So that's his ability in some ways, is that he like poison, like when like he doesn't fight, but like whenever people touch him they just like die because he's just so full of poison. So yeah, it's this interesting kind of like a character in an isekai kind of like premise. But I don't really like the art that much. I watched the whole anime series. I don't really like the art super well, and I feel like he looks like a vampire. In the like for me, he looks like a vampire, and he's not like that's not how that actually look like. Anyway, totally
Yeah.
spoiled, I think, by Bungo Stray Dog. So that's why it looked a little. But if you're interested in that, you want to watch everything and read anything that he's in. So yeah, so that's my recent recommendation. No Longer Allowed in Another World.
And I think there's I don't know if this is a manga and an anime. I think it's a game, maybe an online game. It's called like Bungo no Alchemist or something like that. Yeah, and that's one where as I was doing research about these literary figures, I was seeing that like oh, like they're also characters in Bungo Stray Dogs and they're also characters in Bungo no Alchemist. So
Yes,
I think they do kind of similar themes in the Alchemist one where they take real authors and make them character. I think it's a computer game.
I think it's an anime too.
It might also be an
I think it's
anime.
an anime.
Um,
Yeah,
but it seemed like many of the characters that appear in Bungo Stray Dogs are also used in that one as well. So
yeah,
another thing that you could check out if
yeah.
you are interested.
But do this first. I mean,
Oh,
absolutely
Bungo
do
Stray
Bungo
Dogs
Stray
is the
Dogs.
best one.
Guess
Bungo
about
Stray
all the
Dogs
other
is the
ones. They're
best
just
one.
like side things, but like definitely this first. Anyway,
Anyway.
all right. Again, we can stay here forever and we will, but we should go. We should let our listeners go also. But I hope, like through this, you also discover some interesting characters, interesting authors that you have not encountered before, and will be inspired to read their books because their books are also great. So, and of course, like do check out Bungo Stray Dogs if you like manga, if you just love literature, I think, right? Like not just you love manga or anime, but anyway. All right. That has been fun. Thank you, Emma, for indulging me in this like
So it
random.
was a mutual indulgence.
Okay.
Our poor listeners are going to have to bear with us for this episode.
No, it's okay. Sorry, listeners, and sorry to I don't know Korean. I don't know if Korean and say they're like, yeah, no, we don't need to listen to this. It's just going to be them like anything about this show. Anyway, so thank you everyone for joining us. We might be a little bit more control next week. We'll see. We'll see what happens next week.
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you again and happy reading. We'll see you and we'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.